podcast.
Oakley blokely, guys. Welcome back to the podcast.
And today we have a good one. It's about our staffing.
Staffing. Okay.
So, how many staff does it take to run your shop, and how many hours are they working on average?
Good question.
Yep. So,
listener.
Yeah. Thanks for sending that in,
Yeah.
and we'll talk to you all next time.
Have a great evening. How many staff does it take to run a shop? So there's two ways to answer that question. How many people do we have there at any given point in time? And how many total people do we have on
right.
staff?
Yes.
So this sounds more like they're asking how many total people we have on staff.
But we might as well answer both of them.
So we have two people on at a time at our place. And that's a whole other conversation, I think, about how many people you need working at your shop at any given point in time. But assuming you have that part figured out, it takes us about, for a 24-hour operation like ours with two people on staff.
And 6 tanks.
We have about usually 12 to 14 employees.
Yep, I just double-checked. We're doing some training right now of some new people coming on, so we might lose maybe one of those, but we have 14 people right now.
Yeah, so we always seem to hover somewhere in that range. Kind of 12 seems to be the lowest, and 14 seems to be generally the highest that our kind of staff pool goes, and that does not involve us. So we're not really working any hours in there.
Yep, and it does involve 2 shop managers as well. So of those 14 right now, 2 are managers and 12 are kind of more regular shop
and
staff.
Those managers are working hours too. And when they're working as one of those 2 people. So it's not like 2 people plus a manager. It's a manager there for however many hours, and then they'll also work hours kind of not at the shop doing more managerial stuff.
And pretty much the only time we'll have more than that is when we're doing deep cleans and actually just want, when more people actually makes things go faster, because you can crank through more tanks at a time.
Right.
Or when we're doing training. So if we have someone who's coming on board and doing training, then we'll have our 2 regular staff, and then the third person who's training up will also be there, kind of more shadowing them and helping out and learning.
Yeah, so with 14 people, we tend to have a mix of how many hours those people are working. So we have a handful of those that are, closer to full-time in the kind of like mid to high 30s every week. And we also have a handful of people around part-time, like 20 hours-ish a week. And usually just a few people down lower than that, like 12 to 20 hours a week.
Yeah, and that tends to be, if we let people get down there, it tends to be staff who have been with us for a really long time, and maybe they're even transitioning into doing other things with their life, but still want a presence in the shop or something, and it's nice to have their experience. But we found just practically, when you start getting down below 20, or I'd even say often 25 hours a week, it gets really hard to have people stay up to date on everything that's going on and changing, and just which tanks are down and what pump is having trouble or anything like that. If there's something new that they have to learn and they're only working 8 or 9 hours a week, just practically, again, it's been very hard to keep them in the loop and as good as the other staff members.
Yeah, it's kind of like one shift. If someone just has one shift a week in your shop, it like tends to be tricky for them to just be like as caught up as everybody else is.
Yeah, so definitely I'd say, and looking at ours, it definitely is around the 20-hour week is where most of our people are, like 20 or above.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's about, I'd say like 2/3 are kind of in that 20 to 30 range, and then 1/3 is in the 30 to 40 range, seems to be at least the current breakdown.
Yeah, and how many of those people have other jobs?
Quite a few. I think at least everyone who's under that 30-hour mark. And some who are above the 30-hour mark also have other jobs that they're working.
Right.
And that's an interesting decision. Obviously, you kind of need to make your own decisions for your float center, too. I guess some of the philosophy that went into this, and a lot of it was even less philosophy and more trial and error, was just that if in the process of trying to get people who are working more full-time, it means that if anything goes wrong with one of those people, or if suddenly you have to let go a full-time person, another one of your full-time people is sick, it's really hard to find anyone to cover those shifts. Obviously, the more people working full-time, the less overall people you need at all. So there's just less hands around to actually cover those shifts.
Yeah, and I mean, the other side of that is pretty much the less people you can run any sort of business with, I think, the better. like with more people comes more difficulty across the board. Like you have to communicate between a larger group of people.
Which gets exponentially more complicated.
Yeah, like you have to, make sure if even small things like buying food and beer for, a staff meeting becomes more expensive the more people you have. Like a small kind of agile team, I think tends to be a better general philosophy in terms of business, but you have to balance it out with making sure that your current employees can take time off if they need to take time off, or go on a trip if someone wants to leave for like a week and a half to go travel somewhere. Like I've always wanted to run a business that allows that. Like I would hate the idea of someone not being able to go on a trip or something because we can't get the shifts that they're working covered.
And yeah, it's not like we started out with this kind of number in mind or had all of this really planned out necessarily, but just kind of organically growing to it. We really haven't had to turn down many vacation requests or anything like that.
I actually can't think of one that someone has sent in and we've denied in.
And at this point, the amount of shifts that you or I have to cover is none. With this current setup, our managers are pretty much able to swing in to cover if any of the other staff can't. So, at least for us, again, with 6 tanks and running meager 24 hours a day, we seem to find our stability in that 20 to 40 hour range and with 12 to 14 staff.
Yeah, and it's still organic. We have no system in place to keep it that way or like keep these numbers the same. Like this aren't policies that we have or anything like that. Like it's just kind of stabilized that over the years, and it tends to hover right around those numbers. Okay, well, as always, make sure to grab them before they're all gone. See you later.